All right, thanks, Jacqueline, and thanks for the Medina Chamber for setting this up. This is pretty timely information. The Director Acton's order came out last night around midnight, so we're 11 hours into this, and we're doing our best here. So we've been scrambling this morning to update the information as appropriate, and so we're trying to get you the most up-to-date information. Bear with me while I work on my PowerPoint here. All right, the agenda, we're going to do some brief introductions. We've also got Krista Wazowski from the Health Department on here, so we'll do some brief introductions in a minute. Do a quick overview of the legal landscape, talk mostly about Responsible Restart Ohio. I think that's most applicable to everybody. But we'll also talk about some CDC and OSHA guidance. We'll talk about potential legal liability. And then at the end, we'll leave some time for additional updates from Krista and the Health Department and some question and answers. And then we got to wrap up. We got a hard stop at 12. So we're going to move through some of this pretty quickly. So as Jacqueline mentioned, I'm Dan Calvin. I'm an attorney at Critchfield law firm here in Medina. Critchfield, we've got 40 attorneys and 5 offices. I personally live here in Medina with my wife and daughter and dog. And we love it. So we're looking forward to, helping everybody get restarted here in the community. And I'll kick it over to Krista to do her introduction.
And good morning. My name is Krista Wazowski. I'm your Medina County Health Commissioner. This is my 15th year as a health commissioner, but certainly only the first time that I've ever had something of this magnitude truly affecting all of our communities at the same time. So I'm pleased to be here today, and I want to give plenty of time for Dan to walk us through some of the changes, and we'll have time for comments as well. And like Dan, I'm also a resident here of Medina County with my husband.
All right, well, it wouldn't be a presentation from a lawyer if there wasn't a disclaimer at the beginning. So, while we would love to represent all of you, we don't. And this is not intended to be legal advice or to create attorney-client privilege or an attorney-client relationship. So to the extent that you've got questions that we can't answer here today, I encourage you all to reach out to your own legal counsel or give us a call if you have other issues. The other disclaimer is that, like I said, this came out 11 hours ago, so we're all working with new information. The guidance has changed every day this week, so continue to watch for updates. Just because the order is what it says today and the rules are what they are doesn't mean that's what they'll be next week or the week after that. So quick overview. So we got a couple different things. There's been a lot of action at the state level, but I think it's important for employers to keep in mind that there's also some federal regulations as well. So the big thing there being OSHA, and then the CDC is issuing a lot of guidance. We're anticipating maybe next week that there's going to be some new guidance. I think the CDC said that they sent some guidance to the White House this week, so be on the lookout for that. At the state level, we've got the orders from Dr. Acton, including the one that came out last night. And then here at the local level, we've got our local Department of Health, doing their best here on the ground to issue additional guidance and help out the residents of Medina County in interpreting and putting into place these orders. So we're going to start with probably the most popular one, which is the Responsible Restart Ohio program. Talk about scheduled reopenings, continued closures, the responsible protocols, and then touch on a little bit of the industry specific, just kind of touch on the highlights there. So as far as reopenings, today is May 1st, and so falling into that bucket is dental, vet, and doctor's office, and now the ability for non-essential procedures that do not require an overnight stay. On Monday, May 4th, we'll have manufacturing, distribution, and construction, and then general office as well. And then on May 12th, they're gonna open up consumer, retail, and services. One thing that was in the order from last night that is new and I don't think has been discussed this week relates to retail. So I want everybody to pay attention closely to this one. So currently closed retail establishments are able to reopen tonight at 11:59 p.m. if they restrict their operations to curbside pickup, delivery, or appointment only, and they limit that appointment only to 10 customers at a time. So that's a big change. It's probably the biggest change in the order that came out. So everybody should be aware of that. If you're one of the business owners that falls into that category, you don't need to wait till May 12th. You can start opening up this weekend. And I think the other thing to point out is that you're only allowed to open up in these buckets here if you can safely meet the mandatory safety and social distancing requirements that we're going to talk about next. So continued closures, I'm sure everybody's seen this list, but schools and daycares, dine-in restaurants, hair salons, nail salons, barbershops, adult daycare, entertainment, recreation, and gyms. And that goes further into detail, health clubs, swimming pools, campgrounds, all of these places. So the big thing that hasn't been talked about this week, there's been a lot of focus on the whole responsible protocols, but keep in mind that there are still social distancing requirements that need to be adhered to here. So these are the ones we've been doing all along. Maintain 6-foot distance, wash hands, cover coughs, regular cleaning of high-touch surfaces, discourage shaking hands, do your best to designate 6-foot distances, tape on the floor, signage, hand sanitizers throughout, separate operating hours for vulnerable populations, and to the extent possible, doing online and remote access. And then on top of that, we've got these 5 responsible protocols. So the first one being the big one that's kind of been all over the place this week is face coverings. And so here is really where the rule landed. So for customers and clients, they should wear face coverings. It's not required, but it is heavily encouraged, I think is what the governor has been saying over and over again this week. It's heavily encouraged that you either require or recommend that customers and clients wear face coverings. On employees, it's a must. Face coverings must be worn while on the job, except for one of these exceptions here: prohibited by law or regulation, violation of documented industry standards, not advisable for health reasons. Somebody's got breathing problems and this restricts their breathing, that kind of thing. It's a violation of the company's documented safety policies. And this next one is, again, this is a change in the order last night. So an employee that's working alone in an assigned work area. So everything we've been hearing all week is that it had to be an enclosed workspace. So that language got changed in the order, and it is an employee working alone in an assigned work area. So this would be mostly applicable in my mind to general office, when you've got somebody that's got their little cubicle or they've got their designated office. We don't need people to be sitting in their own office with their mask on. And then the last one is a functional or practical reason why the employee cannot wear a face covering. So that's a pretty big exception. The lieutenant governor had a couple examples of that. One of them being, a factory that's 100 degrees and they put it on and you sweat through it right away. That's not necessarily practical to be wearing a face covering there, but maybe have it around your neck so that when you go into the break room or you go to clock out, you can put your face covering up. And then if asked, businesses are going to be required to provide written justification for why their employees fall into any of these exceptions. And just to be clear, facial covering doesn't have to be a mask. That's kind of what everybody's been talking about as masks, but the order says that at a minimum, it should be cloth or fabric and cover an individual's nose, mouth, and chin. So it can be a bandana, it can be, anything, a scarf, something's better than nothing. It doesn't have to be a mask. And I don't know, Krista, if you have anything else you want to say about masks.
Yeah, we've already started receiving calls, and as Dan said, the guidance had changed a little bit over the course of the week as there was a more understanding about some of the unique situations that businesses might have in their workspace. So we had someone call this morning and ask on a construction site if there's two people working and they need to be able to yell to one another to turn something on or turn something off. And certainly that's not practical to have them wearing masks, and actually it could actually fall into the safety as well. But the one thing I think I want you to know as a business is that we are not going out as the health department and walking into businesses and asking you, doing audits or asking you to provide that documentation to us. The only time that we would ask for that documentation is if we receive complaints. And everything we've done to date has been complaint driven. Sometimes, honestly, complaints come from employees within shops. Sometimes complaints come from customers and others. So we don't go and do those audits on our own. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that.
Okay, so on to the next protocol is conduct daily health assessments. So a little bit more detail on that. So the CDC has a list of symptoms, and this list has recently been updated. It was just cough and shortness of breath. And now they've added these additional 7 symptoms here. So I'm not going to go through them. You've got them there. The Ohio rules say that the assessment should include taking temperature and watching for cough and trouble breathing, but please be aware of these other symptoms here. And just a clarification here, employers are not required to do the health assessment. An employee may do the health assessment. You can stand outside and take everybody's temperature when they walk in. You can ask them how they're feeling, if they've got any cough or shortness of breath. But it would be completely appropriate to put that onus back on the employee and say, before you come to work, you need to do your own health assessment, take your temperature, that type of thing. And again, Krista, if you have anything else you want to say about health assessments.
Yeah, I think this is one area where I think there could also be some legal questions. I know we've had businesses say, how do I have to maintain that? Is it something, can it be the honor system? How do employees put that? Do they have to tell me their temperature? What if other people see it? So, I would refer people back to the intent. And honestly, when it comes to your workplace, I say that you have to know your employees. Some places it makes sense for us. We all know each other well. We work together all the time. We have temperatures that are taken, and there's a yes or a no box that's circled, and people go on their way. I know I've worked with a business that wanted to have an individual sheet for employees to sign and maintain, and they turn it into their supervisor. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and if it's helpful, we can supply those to Jacqueline and the chamber to have available as different options that businesses may choose to use for that particular requirement.
Okay, so the next couple, you're hearing about quite a bit: maintain good hygiene, wash your hands, social distancing, hand sanitizer, all that, and then cleaning and sanitizing workplaces. There's some more detail in the specific industry-related guidance there, but one big thing with cleaning and sanitizing is, where are you going to get the cleaning products? I know that's a big issue. Everybody wants their Lysol wipes or whatever, but I think it's helpful. This came from the Ohio Department of Health, and it's, top 5 ways to disinfect when everyday supplies run out. So, hopefully we all know that bleach is a great alternative. So while it's maybe not as easy to use as a Lysol wipe or something like that, you can get a big thing of bleach and a bucket of water and off you go. So I encourage you to take a look at these. We understand that supplies they're in short supply, and so you got to do your best to keep things clean. And then the last one here is limiting capacity. So establishing a maximum capacity at 50% of the fire code. So and then using appointment setting wherever it's possible, because you don't want a bunch of people in your waiting room, that type of thing. So got questions on the fire code, you could reach out to the fire department. It's probably on your occupancy certificate for your building. It may be posted at your entrances. So there are ways to figure out what the fire code says the maximum capacity is for your building. And then you want to establish at 50% of that number. I'm going to kick it over to Krista to talk about, what happens, God forbid, if you've got somebody in the workplace that is sick and who tests positive.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what our process is here in public health and how it would work for you as a business owner. So this is something that is new that we're asking as more businesses open and we have more people interacting with one another. We really need to work in partnership with you to identify persons who are ill. So one of the things that you're doing when you take the temperature of your employees and ask about their health symptoms, you're on that first identification point when someone's going to be becoming ill. So if you have someone that comes into your work site and you realize that their temperature is elevated and that they need to be sent home, what we're asking you to do, in addition to sending them home, we're asking you to help us educate folks. So when they go, ask them to return to home and remain in their home. And then we're asking you to also give us a call. We'll make that first contact. We'll see if they are someone who's eligible for testing. I know Dr. Schubert is on this call as well. I saw him when he signed in. So I can tell you that testing, we still don't have it broadly available in Medina, but we do know that it's coming in the region. We have some pharmacies and larger corporations that are coming in and doing testing. It's a slow process, but once we have that available, we'll be able to help refer and to get people testing. But for right now, what we need you to do is to give us a call and certainly let the employee know that as well. And the reason that we're asking the business to give us a call is that we also want to make that quick assessment with you of who else that employee may have been in contact with the 2 days prior to the point in which they became sick. Because that's our look back period that we begin our contact tracing. And what we want for you as a business, and truly one of the reasons why we put the safeguards in place about distancing and barriers and masks, and the reason that we do that is that we want to keep your employees separated from one another. Because if you do have someone that becomes ill, and they've been in close contact with other employees, sitting right next to each other at lunch, doing the things that all of us normally had been doing in our workplaces, those are things that could then cause other employees in your work site to be placed under quarantine. So that's why we're asking you as a business to make that call to us. We can do a quick assessment and talk you through that, what that might look like. You may have someone else that you may need to also send home. But we want to do that in cooperation with you. And we want to do that to help you protect the rest of your workforce. Now, that being said, in medical settings, there's a little bit of a different protocol that we follow. But if there are any medical practices who are on the phone, certainly you're probably well aware of the CDC guidelines for that. But all employers, we are asking for that phone call. And then we'll follow up beyond that.
And I think really the big thing that Krista just talked about is education and communication. I mean, when the employees start coming back to work, it's really going to be on the employer to post signage, to explain the risks, to explain why social distancing is important, those types of things. So if you need any resources on that, please reach out to the chamber, to Krista, and we'll try to get some of that stuff to you, because that's a big part, especially when we get into the CDC guidance and OSHA guidance, that a lot of what they're saying is you need to be responsible for making sure your employees know what to do, because we just can't assume that they've been watching the news every day and every day at 2 o'clock they're watching Governor DeWine. So a lot of training, a lot of communication will be important. So, we were talking, Krista and I were talking a few minutes ago, and she said getting a lot of calls on how how this can be implemented. Any ideas on how we can do this in our workplace? So I was talking to one of our clients yesterday, and he was telling me all the things that they're doing in their place of business. And so he gave me permission to tell his story. So this is Return Polymers, is a company in Ashland. So they're really going kind of over and above here. I mean, they're doing everything right in my opinion. So this first slide talks a little bit about spacing. You know, they're doing a lot of training on spacing, making sure everybody understands the 6-foot rule. They're doing walkie-talkies, again, to discourage face-to-face communication, try to do it through a walkie-talkie instead. They've eliminated multiple entrances. They've got a single entrance. They've got an employee out front taking everybody's temperature every day before they come in. They've got, once you go into the building, they've kind of got a queue set up that everybody kind of starts queuing to go to the time clock. And there's dots 8 feet away. You know, that's more than the 6 feet, but they're 8 feet away. There's this queue set up, and then one by one, people go to the time clock to sign in. And that's really, in their business, a big issue where people congregate. If you've got 15 different people all signing in at the same time, bumping into each other, coming from every direction, that's an issue. They've separated some things in their break room to provide the spacing there. That was initially what they did, and then they went even further. And they got this kind of party tent outside that's doubling as their lunchroom. So they've got these separate spaces. They've got open air. They've got some good ventilation in there. They've run some electrical out there so they can have a fridge and a microwave and that type of thing. And just a few of the other things that they've done. They've got shields and masks for all employees. They're doing employee interviews and orientation via video. All non-operational employees are working from home. They've added porta potties and hand washing stations outside, so drivers don't have to come into the building if they're making a delivery or if they're picking something up. They've got a third-party cleaning crew that comes in between shifts, cleans all the common areas and bathrooms, wiping down, cleaning all common equipment. All doors that could be left open were propped open. If a door had to be closed, they took the doorknobs off, and they've added foot pools. So they're really doing a lot. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's got a list here of 200 and some things. So again, there's a lot of different things you can do. You can be creative to try to implement these social distancing requirements. All right, now we're going to jump into industry specific. So there's a lot in here, so I just want to hit a couple highlights. So in manufacturing, staggering or limiting arrivals of employees and guests, again, to try to avoid having 50 people all walking through at the same time. So trying to stagger that as much as possible. Personnel should work from home if possible. Changing shift patterns, staggering lunches and break times. Again, keeping people apart. As far as physical spaces, we talked about daily deep disinfection of high contact surfaces, regulating the max number of people in cafeterias and common spaces. And then over in the recommended bucket is, if possible, close the cafeteria, limit access to common areas. That's kind of where the risk is here. And then a recommendation is a daily deep disinfection of the entire facility. That may not be cost effective for some folks, but if you can do it, great. As far as general office is concerned, reduce the sharing of work materials, limit travel in between offices as much as possible. Like I mentioned, we've got 5 offices here. We've suspended travel between offices. We don't want, if somebody gets sick in one of our offices, to spread it everywhere else. Post signage throughout. So signage is a big thing. We talked about education and communication. In these requirements, it talks about signage. So putting signage at entrances and common areas, talking about health guidelines, washing hands, hygiene, social distancing, that kind of thing. And then the order itself says that employers should strongly encourage as many employees to work from home as possible. As far as physical spaces go, in the recommendations is to redesign spaces to move people 6 feet apart. And this can be as simple as moving desks so that they're further apart. If you got empty offices, move workstations in there instead of having people share offices. Again, trying to be creative and really keep that distance between people. As far as consumer and retail, specify hours for at-risk populations, I think is probably the biggest one to touch on here. And at-risk populations are elderly, and then the order has you know, kind of a laundry list of different diseases: chronic lung disease, chronic heart disease, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, liver disease, immunocompromised, those types of things. So if you're in the consumer, retail, services industries, that is in the mandatory bucket that you're supposed to specify hours for at-risk populations. Again, another thing in consumer, posting signage throughout. Again, you're going to be educating employees, you're going to be educating customers, and try to explain, you know, how to keep everybody apart here. So that's it on the Ohio specific stuff. Jumping in quickly on the CDC and OSHA guidance. So the standard that we're looking at here for OSHA is that employers have a duty to provide a workplace that's free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So if there's going to be an OSHA issue for you as an employer, it's going to come from that standard. And OSHA has provided some industry-specific guidance. I assume that there's going to continue to be more and more that comes out. They've got some specific guidance for the construction industry, manufacturing, package delivery, and retail. So I encourage you, if you're in one of those sectors, to jump on OSHA's website and take a look at that. Those are one-page PDFs, pretty easy to read through and make sure you're doing everything right there. And then CDC, in conjunction with OSHA, has come up with some best practices, and a couple slides later here, I've got a link to that. So when we send out the materials, there's, you know, it's about a 40-page guide, pretty easy to read, but you can flip through and get a flavor. Luckily, the Ohio order really covered a lot of things that CDC and OSHA are already recommending. So it's not a lot more that you have to do above and beyond, but we're going to touch on a few of those things here. So they've kind of got three buckets here. The first thing is reducing transmission among employees. So encouraging sick employees to stay home, instructing employees that if they've been in contact with somebody that has COVID, that they need to quarantine or isolate for 14 days, social distancing, educating employees. As far as maintaining healthy business operations, this is the second big bucket that OSHA has in their guidance. Implementing flexible sick leave and other supportive policies. So the big thing that OSHA is getting at here is that, you know, think about a part-time employee that really needs to come into work, that really needs the hours, and they take their temperature in the morning, it's 101, and they got shortness of breath. We really don't want that person coming into your workplace. And that's not just for the general health of the community, but you know, you don't want somebody coming in and affecting the rest of your workforce, and then you've got nobody to do the job. So having flexible and supportive policies for that is key here. Another thing that's big that you may not be thinking about is cross-training employees for essential functions. And that's really preparing for people to be sick and absent. If they're, you know, you got to identify your essential functions and then make sure you got a couple people that can do those, so that if the person that does them is sick, you're not shut down there. And then the last is maintaining a healthy work environment. So that's improving building ventilation rates, soap, water, sanitizer, posters throughout encouraging hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, coughing and sneezing into your, you know, into your elbow, not out into the air. And then identifying sick employees and customers and promptly isolating them. So that's pretty much everything there at the federal level. And like I said, this is getting updated daily, and we expect some big revisions from the CDC coming here soon. So let's talk just for a minute here about what's your potential legal liability here. So the first layer here is at the local and state level. It's health department enforcement. So the act or the order that was signed by Dr. Acton last night says that a violation of that order is a second-degree misdemeanor, and that's a maximum $750 fine and or 90 days in jail. That's the same penalty that was in there from the initial stay-at-home order. I don't have any statistics on how much that was enforced, but just so you know, that's a potential out there. The other thing that's probably a bigger area is OSHA. So OSHA has a duty to investigate workplace issues. So kind of how we see this happening in most likely scenario is an employee complaint. An employee makes a complaint. Krista mentioned that they may make a complaint to the health department. They may also call OSHA and say, this is not a safe workplace. And then OSHA has a duty to investigate that, and they're going to show up at your doorstep and say they're there to take a look around. So if that happens, basically what we tell folks here is that don't let the OSHA folks just wander around freely. Be courteous, stick them in the office, call your legal counsel, answer their questions. But the important thing to know here, if you haven't had an OSHA issue before, is that OSHA, even if they're not there for that purpose, they can cite you for any other issues they see in plain sight. So if they got a call that nobody's wearing a mask, they show up and all of a sudden you don't have the right guards on machines and that kind of thing, they can cite you for all of those. The other potential area here is workers' comp. So that would be, workplace injury. And in this situation, an employee getting sick. So if that were the case, you got an employee that gets sick, they make a claim against workers' comp. That's how you could have some issues here. So this is probably a little less likely. It might be a headache, but the workers got the burden of proof to show that the sickness came from work. So given that it's not likely that your employees are staying at home all the time and only coming to work, it's probably going to be difficult for them to show that the sickness came from work to prove that. But just be aware that that's another potential issue out there. And then the last thing is you could get sued by employees, customers, whoever. I mean, employees clients ask all the time, can I be sued for this? And the answer is always yes. Anybody can be sued for anything at any time is what I always tell people. And that's just how our legal system works. And if you've had litigation before, you know that it's not likely to go all the way to trial, and you may never have any actual liability from it, but litigation is a pain and litigation is expensive. So do what you can to try to do the right thing here and avoid litigation as much as possible. A couple other considerations, not really legal liability, but we're all living in kind of the social media world. So we've got to be thinking about, public image. I've heard stories of, some businesses that were open that weren't practicing the social distancing and cleaning and all that kind of thing. And, they're getting bashed on social media and all that type of thing. So keep that in mind. It's not just legal liability you got to worry about. And the other thing is this isn't necessarily a linear path. We're not really past, we're not out of the woods here. So if businesses in our community are not doing the right thing, then and Medina becomes a hotspot, they may shut us down again. So keep that in mind. We all are eager to get back to work and open up business again, but keep in mind that there may be another wave coming. There may be a local hotspot here. So we got to do what we can to do the right thing here and make sure we can stay open. And I'll kick it over to Krista to see if she has anything else that she wants to add from the health department.
Thanks, Dan. I do like how you ended by saying that we need to work this together, because we most certainly do. And I think when folks have a chance to read the directors, that's now called the Stay Safe Ohio order instead of a stay-at-home order, but it certainly does have the stay-at-home at your place of residence in there very clearly on the front page. But it really talks to how much we have to do together. businesses, consumers, all of us, we can affect what happens within our community and in our region collectively. So there's a lot of information I know that we covered today, but I think as a business, when you take a look at the order, and we have them on our website, I'm sure the chamber has them as well, what you really want to look at to kind of digest all of the things that we talked about today is really the need to look at item 8, 16, 20, and 21, because those are the things that you as a business owner need to consider and have in place for when you reopen. One of the things that I also wanted to mention when Dan was speaking was about, you'd mentioned something about an ill customer, and we have had that question with people in anticipation of reopening. The question that was posed to us was, what happens if someone comes in who's sick into our business? And what we have indicated is that you as a business owner, and Dan, you can certainly chime in. You as a business owner make the decisions about what happens within your space. And so if someone comes in ill, the most important thing is that you don't want them approaching and interacting with your customers. It's one thing when you have your employees, you have control over them, but you don't necessarily as much with the public coming in. But you certainly need to have that conversation with anybody who's in that front lobby area or in the front-facing public side of your shop to know how to handle a situation like that. And that's something that you need to make sure that you have that policy in place for you and also for your staff. I think the other thing, we've had a lot of questions coming in about where can I find face coverings? What's the best material? Do I have to give my employees 1? Do I have to give them 5? Can I make them bring their own? The order from the state doesn't say who has to supply, but I think that as an employer, having a plan, and I know here at the health department, we supplied a certain number to our staff to get them started. And then I made the policy decision here that they're allowed to wear and bring in their own as long as they fit with our company image. So I've seen some very clever things made out of women's garments. I've seen some alcohol bags used and made into some Crown Royal used for masks, and certainly that doesn't keep with our professional image. And I don't think the employees would here, but it's something as a business owner to put that parameter in place with your employees. The question has come to about, do I have to give customers masks? If I'm in an industry where I have people coming in and I'd like them to wear a mask, can I have a mask at the door and tell them they have to put it on? You certainly can. You're not required to in the order, but again, that's something that's a business decision that you may want to make with your employee comfort in mind, or with the type of business that you have. Is that practical? How many people do you have coming into your business every day? Can you find a supply? Do you want to provide those? And then have that be something that customers, then obviously they would take them or they would discard them depending on what type of covering that you have. If they take them, then they can wash and wear and use them other places. But I think those are some of those considerations that you need to think about when you're getting ready to reopen again.
All right, thanks for that, Krista.
Sure.
So that's it. So we're on to the question and answer portion of this. Before we get there, I'm going to put in a shameless plug here. So this seminar was about reopening safely. So that I'm sure there are 1,000 other questions you have about everything coronavirus related. So we have spent a ton of time over the last 6 weeks putting together resources, kind of spanning everything from estate planning to unemployment to paycheck protection program, everything. So, feel free to follow this link when you get the materials. We've got dozens of articles and that type of thing there is a good resource for business owners.
Thanks, Dan. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat panel now and we can get them addressed. Or as we send out in the pre-email, if you prefer to email our office and have the questions answered that manner, we're happy to do that as well.
There was one question that was sent in, and Krista, this might be a question for you. The question says, question on actions required after a known COVID employee or customer exposure. The documents state a professional cleaning. So do employers have to hire external cleaners, like professional cleaners, or can they just follow the CDC guidelines and then clean themselves?
That's a great question. You can follow the CDC guidelines. We have a shortcut to those guidelines on our website, and I'm sure Critchfield, and Johnston does as well in their COVID materials. I know that the Medina County Economic Development Corporation on their website has a listing of the local businesses that do that level of cleaning. While it's not it's not required that you have professional cleaning, I would say if you have a known COVID positive case within your business, it's something that you may want to consider doing for the comfort of the rest of the employees in your factory or area in your workspace. So those resources are readily available to you for reference here in Medina County. We have several companies that will come in and do that type of work. I know in talking with them myself that they offer different tiered levels of cleaning. So there are options for you that some are less costly, some, it ranges. And then it also is dependent upon your location. That being said, some of the cleaning that's available isn't like a fogging. It could be practical for a work site that's a small office space that wouldn't be applicable or do much for a large factory. So again, I know that those are available to you and there are options out there. And certainly that's something that when you talk to us at the health department, we'll help walk you through that and help you make those decisions as a business owner.
And then just to chime in on the legal side of things here is I'm just flipping through the order and I don't see that language. I know that was in the graphic that the governor provided. I'm not seeing that here. I see, shut down or deep sanitation if possible. So for what that's worth.
Mm-hmm. And it does not specify the type of cleaning, correct?
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up in chat right now. So again, I will remind you, if you need any other assistance or further connections to different resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to the chamber office. We are here to help connect you to the resources that you need. I want to take this time to thank Dan and Krista for jumping on this webinar with us, especially with this ever-changing information as we move through this, as everyone keeps saying, truly unprecedented times. So thank you very much for your time and expertise. We will get this PowerPoint and recording out to all of the participants. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Nice to speak with everyone today.